Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon. In my last video, I broke down all the weirdness there is to find in every mainline Final Fantasy game, and I speculated that Final Fantasy XVI would be wise to be weird too. Now, I'm only 5 or 6 hours into 16, but I can say that I already see evidence of the sort of weirdness that I expect to see in a Final Fantasy, so I feel like we'll be well served on that front. But it also got me thinking about all those Final Fantasies I touched on. Is it Final Fantasies or Finals Fantasy? We'll say Finals Fantasy, that sounds right. Out of all the Finals Fantasy, which ones are the best? How do you even provide an objective ranking for something that is, objectively speaking, subjective? Well, you make a YouTube video out of it and simultaneously anger potentially thousands of hardcore fans. That's how. Let's rank the top 10 Final Fantasy games, shall we? But before we dive in, would you consider liking the video? It tells YouTube I don't suck. If you think I do suck, you can click dislike, but I guess that's good for me too. Nothing makes sense in the world is chaos. Also, if you're a Final Fantasy or a JRPG fan, would you consider subscribing? This is a JRPG appreciation channel where we wax poetic about our love for the best genre of video games, and your support honestly means so much to me. Before you click dislike and close the video in a fit of rage, let me explain. I'm not saying Final Fantasy XII is a bad game. Not at all. In fact, I feel like the weirdo for not connecting with it in the first place. People online have sung the praises of the Gambit system that lets you essentially program the responses of your party members in battle, and the license board that lets you customize your characters, and the world of Ivalice as like the only real recurring Final Fantasy world. My issue with it back when it originally hit the PS2 is that I just didn't connect with the characters, and the plot was one of those convoluted political dramas that work really well in the television shows and books that I don't particularly care for. I just wasn't ready for that sort of story in my Final Fantasy. However, I have the Zodiac Age, and I'll be honest, grabbing footage of this game in action has made me pretty eager to jump in and give it another shot. So will this one rise in the ranks? Surely it'll have to sit higher than Final Fantasy XIII, right? Speaking of which, I remember being blown away by the first trailer for Final Fantasy XIII. The way the combat seemed so incredibly cinematic felt too good to be true. That's because it was, as it turns out, but I was able to forgive the light deception because the actual combat was pretty fun on its own. This game hit during the height of my love of science fiction, and its completely out there setting of a high-tech sphere in the sky was exactly the sort of esoteric nonsense that I was primed for. I also enjoyed the characters. I know there's a great deal of hate for the likes of Hope and Vanille, which I can sort of understand, but I also think people get too wound up about it. They're fine. Even if they're worse, they're still like, fine. Lightning herself was not characterized in the best way in my opinion, but I liked that at least she was strong and committed. She was a good protagonist, if not one with the most dynamic of personalities. If I'm being honest, I expect there will be something of a renaissance of appreciation for Final Fantasy XIII within the next few years. It's already sort of beginning with people singing the praises of the soundtrack, and it does have a freaking epic soundtrack. This tends to happen as the reactionaries have long moved on to be angry about whatever the newest game is, leaving just the quiet appreciators in place to quietly appreciate things. I count myself among them, even if 13 only sits at number 9 on my list. Final Fantasy VIII took some of the biggest swings of any Final Fantasy game to that point, and honestly even since, maybe Final Fantasy XVI excluded. Rather than continuing with the gameplay traditions of its predecessors, it opted instead to reimagine the mechanics and try to construct logical reasons within the game world for why those mechanics existed. For example, it never really made sense that killing a pack of wolves in the forest would net you some money. Everyone knows wolves pay for everything with credit. They live in a completely cash-free society. So Final Fantasy VIII thought about that and decided, yes, money should be handled more realistically. So now you receive a salary at regular intervals. In earlier Final Fantasies, there were just people who could cast magic spells, but why they could do that was never really part of the story. Final Fantasy VIII answered that question with the Guardian Forces, these strange, mythical sorts of creatures that would form partnerships with people and grant them abilities. They commoditized magic by getting rid of MP and instead treating spells as consumables, things that still had a more or less spiritual essence, but that could be drawn out using the Guardian Forces and utilized in interesting ways beyond just hurling them at monsters. Now, if you've paid attention to the discourse since the game came out back in 1999, then you're well aware that most of these systems were not well received. And in fairness to the complainers, the systems themselves were better in theory than they were in practice. The developers expected us to play the game a certain way, and only that certain way. And when we found effective but boring ways to break that gameplay loop, we ended up with a game that we could crush, but that left us unsatisfied. Still, Final Fantasy VIII sits where it does on my list because I was on board with the changes back in the day and even now. It fails in some spectacular ways, but even that failure creates a fun experience. In fact, I would say I enjoy it even more as a grown-up because I'm able to look back on the characters, another major point of contention for the haters, and appreciate the fact that actually they do behave very realistically, because they are literally children. And making stupid decisions for stupid reasons is a big part of being a kid. Final Fantasy V is often thought of as one of, if not the best Final Fantasy by a lot of Japanese fans. I never understood this as a teenager and young adult. It was boring. The characters were cookie cutter and the story lacked all the dramatic flair of Final Fantasy IV. It was a step back for the series, wasn't it? It was only a few years ago when I replayed it on the PC, meaning it had those god-awful redone sprites. Ugh. The time before the pixel remasters was a dark one indeed. But anyway, I replayed it and I actually completed it for the first time, and I started to understand why it's so beloved by Japanese fans. Because it's so darn fun to play. Yeah, the story's a bit lacking, but the gameplay systems are so well done that even level grinding is a joy. The amount of flexibility you have in creating the perfect party for any scenario is staggering, opening up opportunities for you to sort of break the game in entertaining ways. With the right combination of jobs and equipment, you could create a character who gets to attack multiple times every round, or a mage that can fire off a ton of spells on every enemy at once. The game doesn't tell you you can do this, or explain it to you in any sort of detail. It rewards you for experimenting. More games should take a lesson from that. This was a paradigm-shifting release for the series, and it happened to come at a pretty big paradigm shift in my own life. Final Fantasy X launched just a few months after I turned 18 and was getting ready for this whole adulthood thing that I'd heard people talk about so much. And while I was preparing for a bunch of big changes, moving out, going to school, working full-time, Final Fantasy was making a bunch of big changes too. Final Fantasy X was the first Final Fantasy to go full 3D, meaning environments weren't restricted to heavily compressed JPEG backgrounds anymore. The characters were voiced, with varying degrees of quality. The battle system did away with the active time system the series had been refining for 6 entries, going full-on turn-based. It was a lot to take in. I think part of my affection for 10 comes from the time period it arrived in. It was so different than previous entries, but it was still recognizably Final Fantasy to me. That mirrored my experience in real life where so much was changing, but a lot was staying the same too. It probably ranks higher on my list than it does for a lot of Final Fantasy fans, but I stand by it as one of the best. It took some chances and broke the ice for future big changes to come. When I first played Final Fantasy IX, I would not have imagined it finding a place in my top 5 Final Fantasy games. And this was back when I had literally only played 5 other Final Fantasy games. The big return to fantasy push was the antithesis of what I was into at the time. And the characters looked like goofy cartoons. There were hippo people, for crying out loud. A few years later, I played through it again, and I don't know what had changed, other than me simply growing up some more, but I appreciated it on a completely new level. Its classic gameplay was comfortable and easy to get my head around, and the characters, it turned out, were super endearing. The music, which I initially hadn't paid much attention to, was actually some of the absolute best that Nobuo Uematsu had ever produced. It was a masterpiece. I've had plenty of experiences loving a game that most everyone else seems to hate. This was the first time that I felt the opposite. I don't care much about following the crowd, but in this case, I think they were right. I have no idea why it took me so long to come around on this game, but now that I have, I can say it's definitely earned its place in my top 5. I mentioned this in my last video, but Final Fantasy IV is the game that started it all for me. Honestly, what an achievement this game was. We were barely out of the era of Atari bleeps and bloops, and consoles only displaying a handful of colors at the same time. And suddenly, we were playing what is essentially a Shakespearean drama on our 23-inch RCA TVs. The graphics were gorgeous, especially the battle sprites. The music was better and more memorable than most film scores, and the story and characters went so far beyond what was being done at the time that it's nothing short of remarkable. Final Fantasy IV established series trends that would continue for half a dozen games and would inspire so many other JRPGs, both from within and without Squaresoft. Its whole sword and sorcery meets science fiction focus went even further than previous entries to establishing the unique genre that is Final Fantasy. And its legacy would live on for decades after its release. If you haven't played it, I can't think of a reason why you shouldn't pick up the Pixel Remaster. It's an extraordinary work. I fully understand that this is where I will be crucified for crimes against gamers. Final Fantasy XV is much maligned, and I think it's still several years out from experiencing its own renaissance of appreciation a la Final Fantasy XIII. Still, I've never been ashamed of the things I like, so I stand before you as a firm lover and appreciator of Final Fantasy XV. I love it, warts and all. I guess I should talk about the warts. I won't pretend the storytelling isn't a mess. To get the full picture, you have to play the game, watch a movie, watch an anime series, you have to purchase and download multiple pieces of DLC. This is objectively bad storytelling. However, as someone who has done all of those things, I'm happy to report that the story told in this game and in its extended universe is beautiful. Its world is one of the most intriguing Final Fantasy worlds ever, and it makes me wish sincerely that there was even more Final Fantasy XV content for me to consume. Its gameplay is as big a departure from the series past as we've seen up until Final Fantasy XVI, which has finally dropped all the traditional trappings and gone full action game. I can understand folks not enjoying the gameplay. Even if I didn't enjoy the gameplay, and I more or less did, I still think there's so much to love in this world and with these characters. Final Fantasy XV was the first time I really felt personally connected to a group. The way these guys talk and goof around with each other reminded me so much of my actual real-life friends, and watching them bond, watching their campfire chats, it was really moving for me. This last bit is for the Final Fantasy XV haters. You're of course welcome to continue to hate Final Fantasy XV. I honestly think Square Enix has heard your voices loud and clear. I really hope they would continue to experiment with setting and storytelling, but because of the fan reception, I think they're likely to play it safe for years to come. And that's a shame. I struggled with how to rank my final two. Final Fantasy VI in particular is so important to me that it's hard to think of it as anything but number one. And at various points in my life, it definitely has been number one for me. But when we're talking about something as subjective as a ranking, things are going to shift, and sometimes you just have to go with your gut. Final Fantasy VI is a marvel of storytelling and gameplay, a spectacular display of a development team at its most confident. Without any of that nasty hubristic overconfidence, creating a game that shows deference to what's come before it while boldly pushing in a new and exciting direction. Gone are even the trappings of a traditional fantasy world. For the most part, at least. In their place are machines, steam and magic-driven contraptions that don't replace the sword and sorcery from previous games, but sit comfortably alongside them. The cast takes a page out of the Final Fantasy IV playbook by giving us a ton of playable characters, but this time you can customize the makeup of your party at will. Each of the characters essentially represents one of the jobs from Final Fantasy V, so rather than having 4 placeholder characters that you can dress up for the task at hand, you can have a group of individuals that fill those roles, and you can bring them with you whenever you want. The plot is epic, starting out as the story of a rebellion against a power-hungry empire, and evolving into something with somehow even grander stakes for the world. The graphics are some of the finest on the Super Nintendo, with sprites on the overworld now matching their in-battle counterparts for the first time. And the music. Good God, the music. Once again, now that the pixel remasters are a thing, you really should pick up Final Fantasy VI if you missed it back in the 90s. It holds up today because of its exceptional design and its forward-thinking storytelling. It is a classic. It's not always that things that are widely popular are also things that are truly masterpieces in their field. This isn't some sort of statement I'm intending to generally hate on popular things, just an acknowledgement that often our popular sensibilities are distracted by style over substance, by flash over fidelity, and that's not wrong, it's totally fine. But my point is, this is one of those times when popular sentiment and aesthetic quality achieved a sort of harmony. Final Fantasy VII is a popular masterpiece that continues to define Square Enix's future more than 25 years later. Being a fan of Final Fantasy VII for as long as I have been, it's difficult to separate my memories and affection for the original game from the myriad of other games and movies and books that have come since. I see them all as sorts of different lenses to view the world through. But even at the time of its release, before your Crisis Cores or your Dirges of Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII showed how much room it had for imagination to take root and build on the foundations of an already fantastic game world. The story is timeless and has as much impact today as it did back then, arguably even more so, since it focuses on an evil corporation using up the world's resources to make itself richer. The cast of characters is significantly smaller than its predecessors, which allows for so much more characterization and development to happen that you wind up with a stronger cast for it. The battle system, the materia system, everything here is highly refined perfection of what came before. It's probably why future entries would try so hard to completely remake the formula. Final Fantasy VII had already nailed it so perfectly. The world of Final Fantasy VII continues to expand, with the new trilogy of games showing us what an even more experienced team can do with the same ingredients. I personally don't feel burnt out by the Final Fantasy VII content so far, and that bodes well because I have a feeling we'll be enjoying it for a long time to come. That's my top 10 list. You may have noticed some exclusions, specifically 6 of them. Final Fantasy XVI is definitely in the running to find its way onto this list. Sorry, Final Fantasy XII. Probably going to get pushed to number 11 pretty soon, unless I get around to that replay. As for the rest, I just haven't given them enough time to say for sure. One day, maybe I'll be able to give each of them the attention necessary to rank them among these other classics. We'll see. What are your top 10 Final Fantasy games? Let me know down in the comments. And once again, if you'd consider subscribing, liking the video, all that good stuff, it means a lot to me. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.